With only hours left before his execution, his final request wasn't for a last meal or even a phone call. It was to see his dog one last time. But what happened next didn't just silence the prison. It cracked open a secret no one dared mention. The guards thought Daniel's request was strange, even pitiful, until Max stepped into that yard and made everyone rethink what they knew. The dog's reaction wasn't ordinary. It wasn't reunion tears or joyful barks. No. Max froze, eyes locked on someone in uniform, teeth bared like he'd just seen the devil himself. In that instant, every guard, every inmate watching from their cell windows, realized this meeting wasn't about a farewell at all. Something darker was hiding in plain sight, and it was about to claw its way to the surface. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. That morning inside the penitentiary felt like walking into a storm cloud. The usual routine, clinking keys, boots on concrete, clipped orders from officers, all carried an edge of finality. Daniel sat on the edge of his cot, his hands loosely clasped, eyes fixed on the floor. He wasn't the same man who had entered 7 years ago. Regret had carved deep lines across his face, muting the defiance he once carried. When the warden asked for his last request, guards braced themselves for the usual: a heavy meal, a letter, maybe a desperate phone call. But Daniel's steady voice broke expectations. "I want to see Max, my dog." Some guards exchanged confused glances. A condemned man choosing a dog over people? Almost laughable. But Max wasn't just a pet. He was loyalty, memory, and the last link to a life Daniel had lost. The warden hesitated. Bringing a German shepherd into a maximum security prison on execution day was unheard of. Security risks, liability, all of it screamed no. But one officer, older, quieter, reminded them. Daniel had no fights, no infractions, no visitors. Max was all he had left, and against the odds, the warden finally nodded. Word of the warden's decision spread through the prison like wildfire. Some guards scoffed, muttering that it was sentimental nonsense, while others whispered about the strange loyalty between a man and his dog. 10 minutes in the yard, under strict watch, that was all Daniel was granted. But for him, it was an eternity. The morning dragged until the sound of the outer gate screeched open. Daniel stood in the yard, a lone chair placed in the middle, his wrists cuffed loosely in front of him, his eyes locked on the gate, and then, there he was. Max trotted in, his black and tan coat dulled by age but still gleaming under the pale light. His ears shot forward the moment he saw Daniel, tail twitching with a rhythm that built faster and faster, like an old metronome finding its beat again. Daniel's breath hitched. 7 years had passed, but the bond was untouched. The officers glanced at the warden, waiting. A curt nod gave the signal. The leash slackened and Max surged forward. Daniel dropped to his knees just as Max slammed into him, pressing his head into Daniel's chest with a whine that was equal parts joy and grief. The world around them, guards, walls, execution orders, melted into nothing. For a fleeting moment, it was just a man and his dog, holding on to a piece of life the prison hadn't stolen. But then, the air shifted. Max froze mid-embrace, his body turning rigid, ears locked forward. A guttural growl rolled out of his chest, low and unrelenting. Daniel felt it rumble before he even processed it. The dog wasn't looking at him anymore. His eyes were locked on a man standing a few feet away. Officer Jenkins. Tall, stiff, hands clasped behind his back, his jaw tight. Max's growl deepened, lips curling back over sharp teeth. Guards shifted nervously, one muttering for Daniel to control his dog. But Daniel knew Max. This wasn't random. Max had never growled without reason. And in that moment, Daniel's stomach twisted. Because if Max was right, this wasn't just a reunion. It was the start of something much bigger. Max's growl didn't fade. It sharpened. His body stayed angled toward the gate where Jenkins had slipped out, hackles raised like bristles. Daniel placed a steadying hand on his back, whispering, "Easy, boy, easy." But nothing about it was easy. Max had never reacted this way before, not to strangers, not to guards. His instincts were screaming, and Daniel trusted those instincts more than any courtroom verdict. Officer Ramirez, one of the few guards who had ever treated Daniel with quiet decency, stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Your dog's got a nose for the truth," he muttered. "What's his problem with Jenkins?" Daniel didn't answer outright. He couldn't, but his silence was enough. Ramirez's frown deepened. "Strange thing. Jenkins was on duty the night you got arrested. Funny, though. His name never showed up in the report." The words landed heavy, sticking in Daniel's chest like a stone. Jenkins had been there? Why wasn't that written down? Why hadn't it been brought up at trial? His mind churned with questions, but before he could speak, the man himself reappeared at the far end of the yard. Max's reaction was instant. Another guttural growl, sharper this time, more like a warning than a threat. From the tower, the warden leaned forward, calling down, "What's going on?" No one answered. The guards exchanged uneasy looks. Ramirez kept his eyes on Jenkins, suspicion flashing. The atmosphere felt charged, like a storm waiting to break. Daniel knew this wasn't about his goodbye anymore. This was the opening of something deeper, and Max had forced it into the light. Later that afternoon, the warden summoned Daniel to a small interview room. Max was permitted to sit at his side, his sharp gaze fixed on the door like a soldier on guard. Ramirez stood in the corner, arms folded tight. Jenkins stood opposite, stiff as stone. The warden wasted no time. "Officer Jenkins, why didn't you disclose that you were on site the night of Daniel's arrest?" Jenkins's jaw clenched. "Didn't think it mattered. I was off duty, just passing by." Max's snarl cut him off, echoing through the room like thunder. The silence in the room shattered when Max lunged a half-step forward, a sudden bark exploding from his chest like a gunshot. His muscles locked, ears pinned flat, eyes locked on Jenkins with the precision of a predator. Every guard flinched. Even Jenkins's composure cracked for a split second. Ramirez seized the moment, his voice cutting through the tension. "Funny thing," he said coolly. "A witness just came forward. They saw a man matching your description leaving Daniel's house before the police ever arrived." The warden's jaw tightened. His tone dropped to ice. "We're reopening the case. Effective immediately. Daniel's execution is delayed." Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. Hope, raw and terrifying, surged through him. Jenkins's glare was poison, but the room had shifted. The truth was no longer chained up. The days that followed unraveled everything. Fingerprints were retested, evidence re-examined, records pulled apart. The results spoke loud and clear. The prints weren't Daniel's. They were Jenkins's. Witness statements surfaced, proving Jenkins had been at the scene, planting evidence, twisting the story. Within weeks, the same man who stood smirking in uniform was the one in handcuffs, charged with the murder Daniel had nearly died for. And then came the moment Daniel thought he'd never see. The gates opening, not to march him to death, but to set him free. No shackles, no guards, just open air and the sound of keys unlocking possibility. On the other side stood Max, tail wagging like the years hadn't carved distance between them. Daniel dropped to his knees, burying his face in the familiar fur. His voice cracked, whispering, "We made it, boy. We made it." For the first time in years, Daniel wasn't defined by chains or a sentence. He was the man his dog had trusted all along. And Max, loyal, relentless Max, had been the key to the truth. If this story hit you deep, share it with someone who needs a reminder that hope can come from the most unexpected places. And don't forget to subscribe. The next story might just change the way you see the world.